What is Christian nationalism? That is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and I found a really good video that I haven't watched. I just know it's going to be really good, usually because it's Mr. Beat. Mr. Beat is a YouTuber, not Mr. Beast, but Mr. Beat is an American history YouTuber. And he does a really good job breaking down American history topics, which I love. And I'm a big fan of his channel and have been watching it for many years. And he has a video on Christian nationalism. And so I thought that that's what we would be in dialogue with today. So make sure you go like and subscribe to Mr. Beat's channel. He does amazing, amazing work. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on in. Gotta get started.
I'm Mr. Beat. I'm here in Stanton, Virginia, a lovely little city in the Shenandoah Valley. But like most American towns, no matter where you go, you see churches like this one everywhere. And this one. And this one.
Yeah.
Or this one. You get the idea. There are approximately 370,000 churches in the United States.
It's a lot.
And of these, around 332,000 are Christian churches. Oh, you want a percentage? 90% of American religious buildings are Christian. Which is no surprise because, yeah, the biggest religion in the United States is Christianity, the religion based on the teachings of Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's a church now, probably.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely. It's a church building.
Thank you for doing that. Perfect timing. You don't have to keep going. It's also the biggest religion in the world, but...
One thing to know about Mr. Beat is he's I think he's a former teacher, and so he has this kind of cheesy delivery, kind of dad style of delivering his content, which I appreciate.
Focus here, brother. In this video, we're talking about the United States. What about this thing called Christian nationalism? What about it?
I would say this. I know this can be offensive to some people. I believe our nation was founded upon Christian principles and founded upon the Word. I mean, you can look at the Bible and you can find, okay, it was primarily our founding fathers were believers.
The photo op of Trump after he lost the election in 2020 in front of the sign with the Bible was one of the most ridiculous photo ops of all time. Unbelievably ridiculous.
In the Lord Jesus
You
Christ.
can transform the culture and change its direction just as much as Hollywood has already changed the direction of our Christian nation.
This is a nation that was founded on Judeo-Christian ethics. Above my courtroom it read, "In God we trust."
So this is a lot of rhetoric that you see, right? And Christian rhetoric in politics is not always bad, but it can obviously go too far, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
That if we actually go back to our Christian roots and we go back to where we once were, it's America's best hope for revival.
So while the media is going to lie about you and label Christian nationalism, and they're probably going to call it domestic terrorism.
Well, yeah, it's been brought up a lot lately. So I guess I ought to explain it since I like to explain stuff so gosh darn much.
My name is David Congdon. I'm an editor at the University Press of Kansas, but I'm also a theologian and scholar of religion and politics.
Oh yeah, David's gonna help me explain it too. We'll explain what.
What's great about this video is instead of him just like explaining it himself, it looks like he's gonna just like talk to experts, talk to theologians, and try to get a sense of really what's going on in the country when it comes to this issue. Because one of the biggest critiques about Christian nationalism is people are like, well, how do you identify it? Is it just mean you're a Christian who wants to do Christian things in public? And it's like, no, that's not the definition, right? That's not an acceptable definition. But Christian nationalism, from my viewpoint, is the toxic forcing of religious values onto a secular government. And frankly, in an illegal way and in a way that deprives people of their religious liberties and civil liberties.
What it is, where it came from, and why so many gosh darn people keep talking about it lately. Did you know that your personal data is sold online by data brokers? Anyone can buy your personal details. Yes, even your enemies, who could get your personal information to dox you or stalk you or even harass you. Well, I personally recommend that you use Delete Me to make sure that your personal information...
I've never had a baked-in ad in a video I've watched before, but let's just watch it. Who cares? Yeah, protect your data online, you know?
Stays private. What I like about Delete Me is that it sends you these personalized delete my as you can listings delete from Mr. J.
There we go.
Christian nationalism is the belief that the American nation is defined by Christianity. But I'll let David break it down even more.
Before David jumps in, look, Christianity was 100% founded majority-wise by Christians, by Christian men, and their ideals that were very much founded in Christianity. But it was founded on purpose as a secular nation, meaning that the government would not promote religion in an official capacity or force people onto a certain set of religious values, even within Christianity, because the founders themselves were very religiously diverse. Religiously diverse within Christianity.
Go ahead, David. David.
I would define Christian nationalism as an ideology that fuses American political identity with Christian identity. There are two major versions of Christian nationalism. One group says that America was originally a Christian nation and it needs to be recovered. That identity as a Christian nation has to be restored. The other one says that America was never a Christian nation, and so it has to be reconstituted today to fulfill its true identity as a Christian nation.
Basically, some Christian nationalists believe the United States was founded as a Christian nation.
Folks, we were founded as a Christian nation.
Yeah, one of the things that I did when I was in the church, I removed the flag from the sanctuary, and I did this very intentionally. Any church I pastor, we're not going to have a flag in there unless we are praying for a certain nation. So sometimes we'll allow flags in if we're praying for a certain nation. That's okay. But just like the standing flag up on the chancel rail where communion is being served and there are religious images, I don't want the flag to be fused with those. And I think that's very important. And so the reason this did not create a ton of controversy for my church, it received a little pushback, but I'm like very famously super patriotic. I have like a Declaration of Independence and a Constitution like hanging in my house or apartments over the years. I'm super into American history. And so I think my parishioners knew that. And so when that came from me, right, it just landed differently because like, okay, Matt is super patriotic. So this is really coming from a place of he's concerned about the theological ramifications of it. When I think sometimes if it was anybody else, I think they'd be like, oh, this guy just, he has a problem with America or something like that.
Right. You can't erase that from our history. People try, but they can't do it. Right.
Or that it should have a Christian form of government.
America should be a Christian nation.
And not just any form of Christianity, usually a very
right-wing evangelical Christianity.
Specific kind of fundamentalist Protestantism.
Right.
Protestantism. Christian nationalism says American laws, institutions, and even identity should reflect Christian beliefs, often through government action.
Oklahoma State Superintendent Ryan.
Okay, I'm from Oklahoma. Ryan Walters is literally like, he has been public enemy number one for most people in the state. In fact, he got so ridiculous that even my conservative friends started not liking Ryan Walters. Basically, he's just a caricature of like a right-wing extremist, and he got in a bunch of trouble. He was being investigated by the Attorney General for a bunch of stuff. And he got in a bunch of trouble, had multiple controversies surrounding him. Nothing has ever really come of it, I don't think. But one of the most toxic individuals who's ever been in state politics in Oklahoma, easily. And as soon as he resigned a couple of months ago, the governor appointed a new state superintendent, and everything's like fine now. And it like everybody's like, "Whoo, we dodged that one." Yeah, Ryan Walters not a mega popular figure in Oklahoma, even how conservative Oklahoma is.
And Walters says schools need to go further. He has ordered all schools to incorporate the Bible and 10 Commandments into curriculum for grades 5 through 12. And now he says he's purchased 500 Bibles. The elected Republican's ultimate goal? Put one in every Oklahoma classroom.
Yeah. Which is just stupid. And here's why I'm going to say this is stupid. This is just like the old school liberalism in me in terms of like, we look, the public schools are already really bad in Oklahoma at teaching like everything else. I don't want them also teaching Christianity because they will also do that poorly. And that is not a reflection on our teachers. That is a reflection on a system that cannot get outcomes because it cannot pay to have enough good teachers. There are a ton of really good teachers. I know a ton of really good teachers. But our state doesn't give the support it needs. And so a lot of really good teachers leave. And so our educational outcomes here are just really, really poor. It's like 49th or 50th in the nation. And so my concern was always around, well, if we're 49th or 50th in education, I'd rather not have Christianity in the public schools. Also, it's against the law. The First Amendment is very clear on this, guys. I'm sorry. It is. It's been backed up by 250 years of precedent of anything that's being run by the public school system or by the public should not be promoting religion. And the reason is because the minute you promote religion at all, you're kind of you're choosing one form of religion over another, right? The fact of even putting a Bible in school, it's like, well, are you going to put one with the Apocrypha or are you going to put the Protestant Bible? The minute you make a choice on that, you're promoting one religion over the other. They tried to start in Oklahoma, a charter school funded by the state that the Catholics tried to start. And it got struck down by the Oklahoma State Supreme Court. And that's been upheld by the federal courts as well. So it's just illegal, right? Because we live in a society where I want people to choose Christ freely, not be forced to choose Christ. I don't think that makes us any more Christian if we are like shoving it down people's throat through the secular government. It doesn't make us any more Christian at all. So, yeah.
Yeah. That kind of stuff. I don't know how far back we want to go. Maybe we want to go all the way back, but the historical roots of Christian nationalism.
I would go pretty far back.
Yeah, it goes pretty far back. I want to be clear too. I'm by no means an expert. I would not consider myself an expert on American history, but for someone without a degree or formal training in American history, I'm getting closer and closer. I've spent a ton of time reading. I do understand the American story pretty well. I spend a ton of time reading about American history, so I'm by no means an expert, but I do understand enough to know that Christianity is a part of the bedrock foundation of the country in terms of the people who were here when the country was started, right? The people who founded it, right? People who were considered too religiously extreme for England. They come here for religious freedom, right? The puritanical movement, all that kind of stuff.
I go back at least to the Reformation. So
yeah.
The Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, early 16th century, I think really set the path to Christian nationalism. Effectively what that did was it created a conflict between Catholics, Lutherans, and the Calvinists. Mm-hmm. And they all began to fight with each other to see who was going to control the territory of the Holy Roman Empire. The principle was established later that century that whoever ruled a particular region, they got to pick the religion of that region. And we see effectively the origins of the nation state in that division of the empire up into these different units that are defined.
The fun thing about the Holy Roman Empire from history, I read a historian one time that said this about the Holy Roman Empire really founded, I'm pretty sure I could get this wrong, so when I'm wrong I always try to give a caveat if I might be wrong, but really considered starting under Charlemagne in the 9th century. But the Holy Roman Empire is this kind of attempt to resurrect the Roman Empire, but it really never becomes a central nation state. It's like really a loose cult federation. It's not really even really a formal state or a formal empire really in a sense. And it's important to note that because I read a historian once that said the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. So it literally, all three words to describe it were not accurate.
And by a religious identity. And that's effectively where we see Christian nationalism in action. And a lot of today's Christian nationalists long for those days where you had a ruler who could say, we're Christian nation, you all are going to be Christian because I'm Christian. That sort of homogeneity of the country, of the
he's showing Charlie Kirk a lot here. I wouldn't consider Charlie Kirk like a full-throated Christian nationalist, as many are. He's not on the extreme end, but Charlie was definitely promoting and definitely in support of government support of Christianity, for sure. I mean, we have to be honest about that.
Nation.
It's not too far-fetched because you look at the Islamic world, there's plenty of theocracies.
Absolutely, and that's precisely what they would want on the Christian side in many ways.
The idea that the United States has a special relationship with Christianity goes way back. In fact, many of the early colonists came to North America to set up their own Christian society based on their own interpretation of the Bible, the holy book of Christianity.
The Puritan colonizers established
the Puritans were religious extremists, considered so in England, and so they came here to seek refuge.
Theocracies. Those early colonies were theocracies, and
of course, then they started doing the witch trials and like hanging witches and stuff. So we see what happens when theocracies go too far.
Rhode Island is really unique in being one that was open to any religious belief. It was truly secular in that sense. But otherwise, there was a strong theocratic idea among those early colonies.
In colonial America, religion...
And that's important to distinguish colonial America and the colonies from the foundation of the United States of America, the Federal Republic. So I'll often tell people, like when I talk about the Methodist movement, sorry, I had to crack my neck and I didn't do it, so now it really hurts. I always say when I talk about Methodism that Methodism predates the Federal Republic here on this continent. What I mean when I say predates the Federal Republic, I mean the ratification of the Constitution after the end of the American Revolution, because that's what really begins the Federal Republic. Is you have Washington, you have the Constitution, the elections of, I guess, let's see, Washington does 2 terms, right? So he's elected, or he takes office in 1789. So 1788 elections, the 1789 he takes office and is president until the 1796 elections, wherein John Adams takes the presidency in March of 1797. And so the Federal Republic really begins in the late 1780s on this continent. And so it's important to distinguish between the colonies and the way that the Puritans were running the colonies and the Federal Republic. Those are 2 different things. Well, 100% 2 different things. And we're also talking about a 150-year difference between the foundation of a lot of the American colonies and the foundation of the Federal Republic.
Government, we're like peanut butter and jelly. If jelly could, throw you in prison for not going to church. Most of the 13 American colonies had official Protestant Christian churches. In most of them, you had to pass a religious test and declare a religious faith, usually Protestant Christianity, of course, in order to hold public office or even vote. Here in Virginia, the Church of England was the established church. Even members of other Protestant denominations, like Baptists and Presbyterians, faced discrimination and persecution. But not everyone here in Virginia liked the idea of government and religion mixing. Famously, future Declaration of Independence writer and President Thomas Jefferson called for the separation of church and state and the establishment of religious freedom for all citizens.
Thomas Jefferson was not an Orthodox Christian. He wasn't even close. He cut up the Bible and made his own Bible, right? But important to note that Thomas Jefferson did write, I think, Thomas Jefferson wrote the most important document in the history of Western civilization outside of the Bible. The Declaration of Independence is an incredibly influential and important document. Maybe the Magna Carta, you could put the Magna Carta up there alongside of it, along with some other stuff, I guess. But really, the Declaration of Independence has a huge impact on world history because it begins with this idea that, all men, all people are created equal, right? And even at that time, we weren't able to live into that idea fully, but this idea that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? This was a pretty new idea in terms of that era, right? And it was a massive protest against the English crown when we declared independence from them, obviously. And so Thomas Jefferson wrote a very, very important document for world history, for the history of political development, political science, but was not an Orthodox Christian. He just wasn't. So
he'd create a bill, which eventually James Madison helped get passed in 1786, that did just that. It made the Church of England no longer the established church in Virginia and guaranteed religious freedom to all Virginians, even non-Christians like Muslims, Jews, and Hindus. That bill, called the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, was big time influential on the First Amendment.
Right, so 1786, we're talking about the period, so the United States declares independence from England in 1776, obviously, but the American Revolution begins in 1775 in Massachusetts, but it takes a year for the 13 colonies to all strike the same note at the same time and declare their unanimous, almost unanimous, one there was an abstention, their unanimous declaration of independence. The war lasts until the surrender at Yorktown in 1783. And then we live under this period called the Articles of Confederation, which was the first form of the Federal Republic, which was more of a confederation. But very quickly, the founders realized, oh, this Articles of Confederation stinks. It's a terrible form of government. We need to have a constitutional convention. So 1786, we're in this kind of in-between time where the Constitution hasn't quite taken effect yet, and the government's really trying to put together a federal republic.
Flash forward to 1787.
Right.
You remember 1787, don't you?
Constitutional.
Wait, you don't?
Convention.
You don't?
Yeah.
That's when the founding father dudes got together to create a new constitution.
Yep.
In fact, the Constitution that so many Americans love and cherish today. Most of those men were, in fact, Christians.
Yeah, the Constitutional Convention, really fascinating story of the time that they spent to put together the Constitution. It took a long time, but they really crafted a very excellent form of government. It doesn't have it's not perfect, has its flaws, but it's really, for a republic, they built a very strong institution of checks and balances.
Some of those men were devout Christians who often quoted the Bible, but the most influential men there had absolutely no interest in making the United States a theocracy.
Basically, I'm talking a lot about politics right now and history, but my sense of the Constitution is that the brilliance of the Constitutional Convention in the form of government we establish is that it makes it incredibly hard to get anything done, and that's actually a good thing. The Constitution makes it very difficult to get things done, which a lot of people hate, but it's actually a really good thing. You don't want the government to be too efficient. When the government is too efficient, it is easier for them to become authoritarian and tyrannical. And so the system of checks and balances is by design dysfunctional and by design decentralized for that reason. And that's the brilliant piece, is that for the federal republic to pass laws, there has to be a tremendous amount of buy-in within Congress and within the other institutions of government, the other branches of government.
Or a type of government in which religious leaders rule based on their religious beliefs and values. Benjamin Franklin strongly opposed using the government to prop up religion, as did...
Also not the most Christian guy. George Washington...
George
Washington was Episcopalian, but not like the most religious guy on the planet, okay? Like, the founders were not like preacher types, okay? They weren't your local church lay leaders either, right? Like, they were Christian, though.
Who once said,
Many of
quote,
them.
"Every man ought to be protected in worshiping the deity according to the dictates of his own conscience." Heck, even James Madison, the freaking father of the Constitution, talked trash about the government favoring or establishing a single religion.
Yep.
Quote, "Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects?"
Yeah, I mean, James Madison's pretty clear here. It's like, if we establish Christianity, a government that has the authority to establish Christianity as the religion also has the authority to say what type of Christianity is the right one. And he knew that opened a door that was dangerous, right? This is really foundational. Sorry, guys, this is foundational American government here. And I know there's a lot of young people online today that are like, yeah, Christian nationalism is cool because some dude with a beard on the internet told me it's cool, but this is not what the founders were talking about. I'm sorry.
And I couldn't find any evidence that any of the other Founding Father dudes tried to change their minds.
No.
Everyone at the Constitutional Convention was pretty much on the same page regarding mixing Christianity with the government. None of them tried to establish the United States as an explicitly Christian nation, bro. Like, not even a little bit. And if you look at the...
And that's okay. You have the freedom to practice your faith in whatever way you would like.
Constitution, it's an entirely secular document. Secular just means not religious. Not once does it mention God, Jesus, or Christianity. And when it does bring up religion, it's like, bruh, leave religion out of this. Article 6, Clause 3 of the Constitution says, quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. And then later, for good measure, the Founding Father dudes added the beloved First Amendment, which says, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So basically, the Constitution says that the federal government can't create a national religion.
That's correct.
Or interfere with religious practice.
That is correct.
It's not actually in the Constitution explicitly that there's this wall of separation of church and state.
The wall of separation is an idea that, especially from Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, who was a strong proponent of separating church and state.
And actually, I think he literally said that line too, right?
Yes, he did, yes. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they were very strong proponents of a society that was not based on any religious affiliation or identity.
Which is what has been a large reason that the United States has been so successful, right? We have immigrants that have come from all over the world, religions, Jews, Muslims who have come from all over the world and brought talents to the economy, which is part of what has made America so successful, is that it is focused on not always having like everybody has to be this homogenous identity, but part of the mixture of ideas, mixture of culture is what has made America, by and large, a large reason for its economic success.
They were all very concerned about the way Europe had created tests for blasphemy and heresy. Right. For them, the wars of religion that I was talking about regarding...
And like, heresy is important when you're dealing with church government, right? When you're dealing with church matters, but state matters. The idea that the state can be kept separate from the church is not an unchristian idea. I'm sorry, it's just not.
In the Reformation era, with the Catholics and Lutherans and Calvinists all fighting with each other, they thought that was the problem. Their vision of America was a society that didn't have those religious divisions and religious violence.
By the way, I was right. Jefferson did coin the phrase, wall of separation between church and state, with his letter to the Danbury Baptist Association. Okay, so the Constitution was a secular document, but that...
Mr. Beat's a very good high school. I think he was a high school history teacher. I'm not sure. He's a good history teacher, though.
Didn't mean the United States wasn't dominated by Christianity culturally. So, Christian nationalism again, on the other side, in the early years of the country, where are we seeing that?
We're seeing that happen especially in the South, in particular, views there about Anglican and other Christian identities there connected to their Southern identity. Southern Presbyterians and others are very strongly Christian nationalists in a way that's more prominent than in the North, which leads into the Civil War divisions there.
The term Christian nationalism has only been around for about 20 years, but that didn't mean it didn't exist in the 1800s.
Yeah, the 1800s, religion was a really strong driving force of the cause of the American Civil War, along with slavery. Obviously, slavery is the main cause of the Civil War. Anybody who tells you any different, by the way, is completely wrong. And do not comment on that, because I will embarrass you in the comments if you try to comment that slavery was not the cause of the Civil War. You will never come back. It will be embarrassing. Just don't do it. Don't do it, because it is one of the easiest things to argue and one of the most foolproof things about American history that doesn't have a ton of nuance to it at all. Literally, the Confederate States of America, literally the vice president said at the founding, we are founding this to protect the institution of slavery. Okay, like, it's very easy to make that case. So, but what was driving the division about slavery, what we should do about slavery, once it got whipped up into fervor within Christianity in the North and the South, Once it became a holy war to free the slaves by Northern evangelicals, and it became a holy war to protect the institution in the South, once religion got mixed into the politics, the war was inevitable. It was never going to, we were not going to avoid a war because it had become a part of the religious fervor. And at that point, if you compromise, that means you're compromising on your faith and you're compromising on God, and it was over. By the 1840s, 1850s, it starts getting mixed with evangelical Christianity, both in the North and the South, and it's over at that point.
It's all the way through. Christian nationalism means different things in different times, can be wedded to different...
By the way, if you want to read a great book about how religion is one of the, religion in the pre-Civil War era was a driving force of our inability to solve the problem politically, it's a book called America Aflame by David Goldfield.
Political views at different points. It's anachronistic. Obviously, none of them called themselves Christian nationalists at that time. But in retrospect, we might see that there's a version of Christian nationalism there. There was a big move for about 100 years to create a Christian amendment to the Constitution. This lasted from the mid-19th century to the mid-20th century. And there was a campaign to add an amendment to the Constitution certifying that the United States is a Christian nation. And it failed, and it fizzled out by the time that Eisenhower became president. But that was a big movement for a long time.
Which is interesting that it fizzled out when Eisenhower was president, because the 1950s were a highly religious time. The post-war era was highly religious. The height of religion, really, religious participation in America was in the post-war era up until about the late 60s, early 70s, which is part of the reason why the church thinks it's in more decline than it really is. The church is in decline in America. Religious participation is in decline, but it's not as bad as people think it is, because we're comparing it to the post-war era in the U.S., which was a historic anomaly in the amount of people participating in religion at the time. That will never happen. A war caused that, right? A war in a response to communism. So when the federal government was trying to respond to communism, which is godless by philosophy, right? Religion was getting promoted a lot by the federal government and by political figures. And so religious participation in the 1950s and 60s was really high. And then it starts to peter out with the counterculture movement in the late 60s. And then in the 1970s and 1980s, it's declining from that peak. Which is why now you've seen in the last few years, we've been in decline for decades, and now it's bottoming out and even going back up. It's because we've probably hit a baseline where it's kind of returning to the status quo norm of religious participation over the last couple of centuries. That's one theory. That's one hypothesis.
Long time.
You said it fizzled out when Eisenhower became president.
One of the first things Eisenhower does when he becomes president
Billy Graham.
is get baptized. He's the first president to ever be baptized.
Wow, I didn't know that, so actually. That's really cool.
A big show of Christianity, of Christian nationalism, you might say now. But then that's what we see in God We Trust, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dwight Eisenhower, I called him David because his middle name's David. David Eisenhower, one of my favorite figures from American history, really a man of principle. Not a perfect man. Everybody's like, oh, he did this thing. That's every historical figure. It's so annoying when you praise them and people come for oh, they did this one thing. It's yeah, but I could look at you and say you're a good person, but I could look at your past if I knew your past or secrets that you have, and I could say the same thing about every single person on the planet, right? Obviously, some people make worse mistakes than others, but Dwight Eisenhower had some mistakes, but really, by and large, one of the most principled, honorable people in the history of the United States.
We see the National Prayer Breakfast get started then as well. So a lot of these public displays of Christianity become...
I actually don't have a problem with the National Prayer Breakfast and would not consider that Christian nationalism. I think that's just recognizing that faith is an important component to the country. And when the president wants to come and pray, I'm pretty sure last time I checked, Jews, Christians, and Muslims are invited to the National Prayer Breakfast. I'm sure maybe in this administration, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's been some recent moments where Muslims are being excluded for some reason, but it was my understanding that multiple religions are invited to that. I just really don't have an issue with that.
Prominent with the Eisenhower presidency. And at that point, there's a shift. It used to be that it was common knowledge that the Constitution was a godless secular document. At that point, the idea that the Constitution is actually a divinely ordained, truly Christian document becomes more widespread.
Yep. During the Second Red Scare, a period of hysteria and paranoia over the perceived threat of the Soviet Union and communism in general, the federal government began to more openly embrace Christian symbols Bibles as a way to counter the Soviet Union's attack on not just Christianity, but religion in general.
Okay, so yeah, there you go. I was just saying that earlier, right? So there you go, see? A lot of the height of religious participation in the U.S. was a direct federal response to communism.
In 1954,
right, which is why in 1954 the Pledge of Allegiance gets added to one nation under God, right?
Congress added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance,
which is probably unconstitutional.
In 1956, it made "In God We Trust" the official national motto. It was basically just an easy way to contrast with the godless communists in the Soviet Union. Jump ahead to the 19...
I mean, you don't have to do the air quotes, right? It was a godless country at the time. That doesn't mean the Eastern Orthodox Church wasn't active. They were, but the country itself did not promote religion. And not only did it not promote religion, it promoted no religion at all, right? That's part of communism.
70s, and a new movement began that mixed Christianity and politics, the moral majority.
Right.
Led by folks like the influential Baptist minister Jerry Falwell, it played a pretty important role in mobilizing conservative Christians as a political force. This is when you got a big push.
So those of you who are Christians and conservatives watching this, you would be shocked how much probably your worldview is shaped by these folks. Yeah, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory sense. I'm just saying your worldview is most likely almost completely shaped by the ideas of these people.
To get Christian prayer back in public schools, for example. By the way, the Supreme Court had already ruled that prayer in public schools was already unconstitutional in the case Engel v. Vitale.
Publicly led prayer. This just drives me nuts. You can pray. Look at me. You can pray in public school. It's okay. You can even pray out loud if you want, if you're a student. The school cannot lead you in public prayer. That's the difference.
Which I made of it.
Like, I hated when I was a kid and these like kids would be like coming to school and they'd have like a shirt on that said, "I broke the rules, I prayed in school." And I'd be like, no, you didn't. You didn't break the rules. We have to be intellectually honest. That's a really important part of being a person.
Video about, I think, that was a long time ago. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Hi.
Yeah, you should go watch that video. It's great.
Case.
His Supreme Court brief videos about like famous Supreme Court cases are some of my favorite videos.
This is like Abington School District v. Shemp and Lemon v. Kurtzman. Also further built up separation of church and state, and the moral majority was at least partially a reaction to those decisions.
Absolutely.
Your top 3 most influential Christian nationalists in American history.
This is tough, but my top 3, I think, in terms of influence. It goes by influence more than by...
I'm interested to see if he says Billy Graham, because I wouldn't consider Billy Graham a full-on nationalist, although he did meet with presidents a lot. But at the end of his life, he kind of reflected that maybe he shouldn't have been involved in politics as he was. So I don't want to just like lambast Billy Graham. I actually have a lot of respect for Billy Graham.
Public knowledge. First one would be John Winthrop. So he's the person who preaches the City on a Hill sermon. He wasn't influential in his time, but he became influential in the 19th century when the City on a Hill sermon became circulated more widely as part of this campaign to spread this idea about America. It doesn't really happen until the 20th century, effectively. My second person may be unknown to a lot of people, but I think is maybe the most important. That is Robert Louis Dabney. Dabney was a Southern theologian and professor. He was a Confederate chaplain. He wrote many of the core ideas that became prominent later on with religious right. For instance, he had a piece against secular public education and in favor of homeschooling.
Right.
Throughout his writings, he has this idea, this line, this is almost verbatim, but when something is non-Christian, it's actually anti-Christian. So Dabney's important. And the third person I'm going to pick, there's a lot of more...
Which is an extreme viewpoint.
Recent figures. You can talk about Falwell or Rushdoony or others. I'm going to talk about C. Peter Wagner.
Okay, I'm really glad he didn't include Billy Graham, because I would not consider Billy Graham a Christian nationalist at all.
Peter Wagner is not a household name, but what he did was he brought together the charismatic Pentecostal side of Christianity to be a force for Christian nationalism. His ideas and his teachings and his network eventually produced what we now call the New Apostolic Reformation. And that is a global network of millions and millions of people. It's maybe the largest faction of Christianity today, growing in size. And that's where we get a lot of these charismatic Pentecostal prosperity preachers and teachers, especially on YouTube and other influencers.
So today, what do Christian nationalists typically believe? If you already know the answer to this question, you should still watch anyway and see if I agree with you. Because you could be wrong.
Well, of course, we can always all be wrong.
I could be wrong too. Sources, as always, in the description. They believe the United States is or ought to be a Christian nation. They do not like the separation of church and state. They believe the Bible should inform American laws and public policy. They want prayer, the Ten Commandments, and heck, even crosses in public schools. And some even want Christianity declared as the official religion of the country.
The reason I disagree with pretty much all of that is because, like I said earlier, Christianity is something that must be accepted freely. It cannot be, shoved upon you. It must be accepted freely. And I think that's one of the benefits of our society is that we are very culturally Christian. So like, please don't pretend that we are some kind of secular godless culture. Like there are secular godless aspects of our culture, but friends, like a large percentage of the country is Christian, and there's a lot of Christian elements in our culture that we get to basically be a majority Christian culture while giving religious minorities rights. And I think that is an incredibly powerful witness, is that we invite others in and we make the table longer while always letting everybody else know who's not a Christian. You always have a seat at the Christian table whenever you're ready, but you can participate in our society without sitting at the same table we do religiously. And I think that's an incredibly powerful witness because it is the kind of invitational witness that Christ gives us a choice in. I think that's powerful.
Most also are against pluralism, or the idea that people of different religious beliefs and social groups can live in the same society.
Yeah, that's a really common thing right now because there is a lot of cultural upheaval and clash of cultures, and that is the great experiment of America, is can a society that is religiously and ethnically and culturally diverse unite enough around a set of ideology and ideas in order to maintain a cohesive society. One of the ways that we ensure this is by using federalism, actually. We use states. So you can go to certain states. If you don't like the culture in one state, you can go to another state, and we allow states to have a certain amount of autonomy and local governments to have a certain amount of autonomy. But it is the great experiment, and I think the jury's still out on whether we can do that. I believe that we can exist in a pluralistic society. Some people think that's naive, but I think 250 years has proven that as a diverse society, we have endured and found a way to unite around ideas, which is what matters the most. So yeah.
We can't defeat Christian nationalism, and we can't oppose Christian nationalism by trying to emphasize the First Amendment. The most important way to address Christian nationalism is to reaffirm and find new ways to support democratic ideals and a pluralistic vision of society. Pluralism is really the enemy of Christian nationalism, not church and state separation.
Yeah,
I'm hoping by this point in the video,
because there's a lot of people that are just like, I can't live with somebody who's Muslim across the street. It causes too much ruckus and turmoil, and there's too many differences. Their food smells differently than mine when they're cooking. Like, it just creates all this. It stirs up the worst parts about humans, right? Our kind of base instinct. We have a base instinct to only hang out or be with people who are like us. And I think the message of the gospel is that we can actually interact with those who are different than us, right? Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee to go to the Decapolis, the 10 cities where the Gentiles live, and he's interacting with them, right? He's healing them. He's kind of, as one of my professors in seminary said, he's showing that he's going to be an equal opportunity savior, not just the savior of the Jews, but an equal opportunity savior, right? For all people, for all creation. And so if we want to live in to our Christian roots, we are going to live into a pluralistic society, because the early Christians were very pluralistic. Jews and Gentile converts living together in the great cities of the Mediterranean, which were really melting pots of culture and nationality and ethnicity, but they were all uniting around faith, right? And they were able to live in those societies and do their conversion and their evangelism without saying, or, always, the early church wasn't burning down the pagan temples, right? They were able to live alongside each other in successful societies. Now, I also know that throughout our history in Christianity, we have chosen not to do pluralism, and that also has consequences as well, right? So I think it is very much a Christian ideal that we can live with people who are not like us and have a successful society where we offer people Christ within that society.
You understand why Christian nationalism,
and that is not only is it possible, that is the best way to run a society, because when we force people to be Christians, we're kind of doing this religious coercion that is not the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus is, he says, come, follow me. And he lets people walk away when they don't want to follow. He doesn't go chasing after them, right? He lets them walk away when they don't choose. That doesn't mean, we also have, he leaves the 99 to find the one. Yes, that's all part of it. But many, many times throughout the Gospels, Jesus offers people salvation and they walk away. And he lets them. He doesn't force them to believe in him.
Scares a lot of Americans. Most Americans don't want a theocracy.
No.
Most Americans love pluralism. Christian nationalism goes against the Constitution, which is an explicitly secular document. And by linking Americanness to just one religion,
yeah, it is. It's an explicitly secular document.
It marginalizes all other people who are not Christian. Remember how at the beginning of the video I said that Christianity was the biggest religion?
To be fair, the Declaration has much more faith elements in it than the Constitution does, just to be fair. The Declaration talks about divine providence, right? That's an important part of it. And at the end of the Declaration of Independence, it talks about, lives, fortune, and sacred honor, and that they are, trusting in divine providence.
The United States. Please tell me you remember that. Well, 4 out of 10 Americans are not Christian. More and more churches like these have been losing membership. This likely explains why Christian nationalists have been pretty loud lately. Simply put, they are afraid of losing their influence.
Yeah, I actually think the rise in Christian nationalism is, by and large part, a response to a reduction in political power among Christian culture in the United States. And what I find interesting about that is that Christians should not be responding at all to any perceived loss in political power, because Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Look at me, please look at me when I say this. This is really, really important. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Now, that doesn't mean that your faith shouldn't be a part of the way you vote or the way you want to see policy enacted. But Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. And so we should not be trying to set up basically political power systems in kingdoms where Jesus is at the head. He didn't want that. He was explicit about that in the Gospels. And so I really hope that those of you watching at home really wrestle with that, because that's the truth of the gospel. Oh, is that it? Okay, I think that is... Oh, no, maybe.
But what do you think? Did I miss anything about Christian nationalism? I'm sure I did. Let me know, for sure. Let's go. Thanks to David for letting me interview.
Matt Beat, he's a funny guy. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. I think this will spark some debate in the comments. Please be respectful in the comments. I had to delete somebody from the channel yesterday for basically making an argument that slavery was okay from the Bible. I'm not going to deal with nonsense like that. We have a pretty open forum, but when you start promoting disgusting ideology, we're not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to tolerate that on the channel. Most of you, though, who are watching, you don't do that. You post really, really incisive, thoughtful things that I often disagree with, but I think are very helpful, and it's been helping me form my own views. And so those of you who disagree with me, The vast majority of you are awesome, and you do it very respectfully, and you make me think about my own beliefs. So I really appreciate that. So let me know what you think in the comments. One of the best things you can do to support my channel is make sure you like and subscribe. Most of you who watch this channel actually aren't subscribed, so make sure you click the subscribe button. It's literally the best way you can help the channel grow. But I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.